Have you been wanting to read a queer, witchy, cozy fantasy? Then I might just have the book for you. This is Mandrake Manor by P.J. Rindfleisch the Ninth,
Wait a minute. Strike that. Reverse it. Thank you.
and it's the book I'm going to review for you today. Matt Mandrake is just about to graduate college. Unfortunately, the prospects for a dentist in the Chicago area where he lives are a little thin on the ground. Salvation comes in the form of a mysterious inheritance. He gets Mandrake Manor in the little community of Henbane Hollow. One problem, it's in Connecticut, and he has to find two people to move in with him. He manages to get two friends on board, the sassy and sexual Frankie and his friend Augustus, who is a non-binary writer. They make their way to Henbane Hollow, and things aren't quite as simple as they thought they might be. And while they're the three of them run into various people who they might have a romantic interest with of some sort, and they also run afoul of the HOA when it comes to cozy reading, at least for me, and I haven't done that much, to be honest. Mostly Legends and Lattes and bookshops and bone dust. When it comes to the cozy literature I've read, I think characters are really, really important. And the great thing about this book is it has some great central characters. In particular, Frankie and Augustus are really well rendered here. I really felt like I understood their characters. Matt, maybe a little bit less so. I kind of had a harder time getting a grasp on him, but he's very likable, as are Augustus and Frankie, and some of the other side characters that get introduced. Presentation wise, I think Mandrake Manor is a lovely book. I really love this illustration. The back illustration is beautiful as well. I think it really represents what the book is and the vibes that the book is giving extremely well. And the inside layout works great as well. Each chapter starts with this sort of botanical motif. There's a poem about a different herb or sort of plant, and then we get into the chapter itself. There were a few minor things, such as like words getting split somehow between two lines. I've actually never seen that before because most layout programs won't separate a word. I don't know how that happened, but there's just a few instances of that. Very, very minor. Otherwise, it's a beautiful looking and presented book. In some of the promotional materials, the author has discussed that they definitely drew inspiration from Charmed, and you can feel that here. The power of the three is very present in this. But the plot of this is sort of something like you would see on Buffy or Charmed or Angel or that kind of show, except maybe a little lower stakes than the more traumatic episodes from those shows to keep with that cozy vibe. The only thing that kind of threw me off a little bit is that it feels like the buildup is pretty slow. We kind of get to know these people slowly, and that wasn't my problem. I actually really enjoyed that. I think, especially in a cozy book, you want to get to know the people in that way. What took me kind of by surprise was how quickly things escalated. I kind of was expecting a little bit of a slower burn with the quote unquote big bad of this novel in particular. So it just kind of threw me off a little bit when it first happened. I was like, "Oh, okay, we're doing that right now." But once it happened, I think it was actually the right time for it. I think looking at the overall flow of the book, I think it works well. And maybe I would have liked a little more time, maybe sort of a secondary threat before we got to this big threat and sort of dealt with it. But that's all kind of just my expectations versus it being good or bad in the book. And I really liked where the status quo got by the end of the book. I think it's a fun setup. Definitely gives those cozy vibes, and I'm looking forward to reading more of this in the future. Prose writing style wise, this book is a full of what I would call snappy patter in the mode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. That's sort of my touchstone for that sort of snappy patter. And that is not always easy to do in a book because you don't have the actors bringing that to life. But I think the efforts here are actually really successful because it can be very easy to make lines feel leaden or they just don't quite work. The one thing I really felt like I was missing that I just wanted more of was a little more description of Henbane Hollow and its inhabitants outside of the characters that we meet. Just because I had a hard time kind of getting the geography of it down, and the nature of the place I think kind of plays into it. But part of me really kind of wanted like a map of Henbane Hollow. I wanted more description of the interesting houses because you do get sort of a sketch of this very interesting neighborhood full of Victorians, and I can visualize it in my head. I just think as time goes on, I hope that that gets filled out even more, and we get certain landmarks within Henbane Hollow to kind of really get a sense of a real place that we could go to and that we would want to be. Overall, I really enjoyed Mandrake Manor. I think if you're not into cozy things at all, then this might not be the book for you. But if you're even just slightly intrigued by cozy stuff, I actually think this is one of the better examples of it that I've read. I have tried a few books outside of Travis Baltry's work and just been a little underwhelmed. It just wasn't quite for me. But this is a little more on my wavelength, so I think that helps. I also love the queer representation here. It has a variety of queer representation, including non binary, which it is Non Binary Awareness Week this week. This was not something I planned, but that's exciting to have a book that actually features one of the three characters, the main characters, is non binary. I remember last October wishing I had a sort of cozy horror book. And even though this is more marketed as sort of botanical fantasy, it has a lot of the trappings of horror, of sort of dark fantasy in this cozy setting. And I think this is actually very much like what I kind of wanted to read last October. I definitely recommend Mandrake Manor. I had a really good time with this. I think if you are the right sort of audience for this book, you will as well.